Hello everyone, and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James, and on this channel I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please be sure to leave a like on this video, and to subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. And today I am bringing you a individual album review, this time for the artist The Weeknd, aka Abel with his newest album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, which looks to be his final album under the Weeknd moniker. So yeah, I would say that this is one of my most anticipated albums of 2025, especially when I heard that it would be The Weeknd's last in terms of him being The Weeknd himself. Abel has been alluding to this for a while. In fact, I would say he's been alluding to this ever since the beginning of this trilogy with the excellent After Hours. And so this coming at this time is not surprising, but it is a little bittersweet, I have to say. The influence he has had in the modern day on pop cannot be denied. He is definitely one of the most influential artists that we've had in the scene, from his more humble beginnings to him becoming a straight-up superstar with Starboy, which was sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and especially After Hours, which had just the absolutely huge song Blinding Lights, which is probably my favorite Weeknd song. I know that's probably a cliched pick, but I just can't deny how excellent that song is. So it's definitely sad to see him leaving, but there is something understandable in him wanting to leave off on the most positive note he can. And there's definitely a lot of trauma wrapped up in The Weeknd, with him talking about his issues with drug use and mental health problems and alcoholism, just all sorts of stuff that has been presented through this artist. So I can understand wanting to leave him behind and wanting to pursue something else. But does it work on Hurry Up Tomorrow? Well, I will have to say that the singles left me a little bit worried. I didn't really care for Dancing in the Flames. I found it to be a little bit of a mid-Weeknd song. I do think I like Sao Paulo a little better. I do like the sort of frantic nightclub vibe that it has. It feels like a dark, dingy room that you're dancing in, and it feels very foreboding. It's definitely a bit of a weird song, and I wouldn't necessarily call it very catchy, but I do think it's pretty intriguing in what it does. And I did hear Timeless as well. I don't usually listen to 3 singles from an album, but if there's one that I don't care for as much, I will try a couple other singles. And I'll admit, I didn't really care for Timeless either. In fact, I found it to be maybe one of The Weeknd's weakest songs. So with that in mind, with my hesitancy in mind, what did we get out of this album? Let's talk about it. So even with my slight apprehension, this album turned out to be a pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed this album, and I do in fact think that it's a pretty solid way to end off The Weeknd's legacy. Now, out of the 3 from the trilogy, I do have to say that this one is probably the weakest, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad album by any means. This one, the main complaints I have for it, which I will get into in my critiques, is that it overstays its welcome, and some of the songs aren't as memorable as they could be. But for all that, I do think the strong moments on this album shine really brightly, especially in the first half of the album and the ending moments of the album. The album opens on a very strong note with Wake Me Up, which has just some immaculate synth work in it, just sounds utterly beautiful, and the little cute nods to Thriller by Michael Jackson are well done. There's a lot of stuff going on this track that I think leaves you contemplating and leaves you interested for what the rest of the album is going to discuss. And I think it's very strong. Has one of the catchiest choruses on the album, and definitely brings back the 80s vibes of After Hours that I was missing a little bit on Dawn FM. So that was a nice return. I also think that Cry For Me is a pretty good song. Now this one, and what I do like about this album is that it tries to do a little bit of everything from all of The Weeknd's eras, from his earlier stuff to his later stuff. And Cry For Me definitely feels like it could belong on an earlier Weeknd album. Some people are not going to like that, but I did enjoy this particular song, and I can definitely see why some people are saying this one should be a lead single, because this one probably does have one of the bigger choruses on the album. But man, the best track that pops up here, and this one could become one of my favorite Weeknd songs as I continue to listen to it, is Open Hearts. This song is utterly addicting, and it sort of perplexes me as to why this song wasn't a single. It is a single now, thankfully. But it sort of perplexes me as to why this one wasn't one of the leading singles, if not the lead single for the album, because it is just the Weeknd at his complete prime, in my opinion. The dark 80s club scene that it has going on in it, I just absolutely love, as well as the little synth riff that it has after its chorus. It is one of the most addicting things I've heard, and definitely gives the synth work in Blinding Lights a run for its money, I think. I feel like this song is a bit of a successor to that one, because this one is also sort of about The Weeknd's relationship with his fame. And here, he's sort of coming to a stark admission that it's hard to fall in love again and again with being such a big artist, because there's so many bad things that come with it. I absolutely love this track. I can see this being one of my favorite songs of the year, and I don't want to say this too early, but at the same time, this one could end up in my top 20, top 15, even maybe top 10. I've already been listening to it so much. And there's other great songs on here as well. Like I said, I like Sao Paulo. I do think it is one of The Weeknd's most experimental and strange songs, but I do like it for that reason. I think it's very odd and very all over the place, but I like the sort of eerie atmosphere that it has and how it really puts you into that vibe. Reflections Laughing is a very intriguing song where I think The Weeknd is maybe at his most vulnerable, and especially in talking about the darkest parts of himself, which are represented through Travis Scott's feature, which I actually found to be pretty good here. I have found Travis Scott to be not as interesting as of late, and not necessarily a very good person for obvious reasons, but I do think he works here, playing the persona of Weeknd's darker id, the ego of him, and what his darkest instincts say about him. Florence is underused here, Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine, but I do think her operatic tones, her operatic backing vocals, and the chorus do give this song a sense of dramatic weight. I just wish that we had heard a little bit more from her in the song. I think a lot of other people feel that way as well. The second half of the album has some great moments as well. I think I Can't Wait to Get There is a really good ballad, and see some interesting reflection from The Weeknd on his feud with Drake. See, it seems Kendrick is not the only one who has problems with him, but it also sees him getting surprisingly vulnerable in places that I don't know if we've ever seen him get quite this introspective as he does on this song. And man, Niagara Falls, just talk about a beautiful song. I don't usually love like pitched up vocal effects, but there's something about this song that makes it work really well. I think it creates an interesting vibe that is almost sort of irresistible and makes this one of the best on the album. Along with Take Me Back to LA, these create two great back-to-back R&B ballads. And while we're on the subject of Take Me Back to LA, let's go ahead and talk about it. This song is actually sort of a sequel to a song from After Hours called Escape from LA, which was one of my favorites on that album. And this one feels like the sort of bittersweet conclusion to that, as The Weeknd sees himself dealing with the most dark parts of himself and not wanting to be by himself, and when he's by himself, he has to submit to the darkest parts of his thought process. It's a pretty dark and dreary song that really puts you in probably the lowest point of the album, which I really do think is appropriate considering the journey we're going on. Because after this, we do get the redemption arc of the album, I think. And then Give Me Mercy, where we see The Weeknd actually delving into his beliefs in God, and I think feels like one of the most genuine sort of reflections on Christianity and faith that I've heard from a secular artist. I think he does really well here, and it feels pretty powerful. I do also think that The Abyss with Lana Del Rey is well done. I like Lana's feature, and she definitely gives this sort of otherworldly sort of transitioning into the afterlife feeling that the song needs, as we are sort of metaphorically going into The Weeknd's afterlife now. The death finally does happen with the excellent two closing tracks. Without a Warning is just wonderful. I absolutely love this song. It feels beautiful, and The Weeknd's voice is just on top. And Hurry Up Tomorrow feels like a great conclusion to this album, where we finally get to see The Weeknd seeing the light and moving on to a better place. But there's also sort of a clever ending where the ending of the song starts playing music that is the beginning track to the first album that The Weeknd ever released, which leaves you with a little bit of a cliffhanger, and it leaves you with being able to go back to the beginning track of his first ever album, and leaves you with the realization that this is The Weeknd definitively leaving behind this persona, and the persona itself will be continuing to live out this cycle for the rest of its life, which can be a little bit dark in some ways. Now, there are a couple of negative moments that I don't care for as much on here. I think an overall negative is that the album does go a little bit too long, I think. I understand that The Weeknd wanted to make something big and cinematic for his final album as this character, and it makes sense. It makes sense with his personality, especially since I'm imagining a lot of these tracks are going to be part of the movie with the same title, directed by Trey Edward Schultz, that I'm very excited to see. But it still does feel a little long at over an hour, almost an hour and a half, and there are definitely places where you can feel that length. I also do think that there are songs where they become a little less memorable because they last a little bit too long. This is a case for songs like Until We're Skin and Bones or Baptized in Fear, where they have really cool ideas initially, but they sort of waste a lot of it as the song goes on. Enjoy the Show, which has a pretty underwhelming feature from Future, which is a little disappointing considering that I do like the Weeknd features from Future's album last year, but for some reason it doesn't really mesh here as well, and the Weeknd comes across more unlikable than I would like him to on this song. I also think that Given Up on Me and I Can't Wait to Get There, all the way to Timeless, is probably the weakest run on the album. Like I said, I do think Timeless is maybe one of the weakest songs that The Weeknd has made. I just do not care for the sort of empty flexing on the song, and Playboi Carti's feature just doesn't really do much for me. I also do think this is another song where it has an issue of overstaying its welcome. So there is that. And that's where I end this review. If this is the conclusion of The Weeknd, then it is a very good one. We started off with After Hours in the trilogy, where The Weeknd was in the throes of life, but barely living at all, and just dealing with so many issues. And then we dealt with the purgatory of Dawn FM, where we saw The Weeknd slowly transitioning, but seemingly in a place of limbo where he wasn't sure what was going to happen. And then we finally get the redemption and Hurry Up Tomorrow, which does by the end feel earned and feel very cathartic. And I thought it was executed well, even if I do think that this is the weakest of the trilogy that The Weeknd presented to us. It is still a very strong album. So I'm going to be giving this a strong 3.5 out of 5 stars to a light 4 out of 5 stars. I'm leaning more towards 4 out of 5 right now. So yeah, that ends this review of Hurry Up Tomorrow by The Weeknd. What were your thoughts on this album if you heard it? Please let me know in the comments down below. And once again, my name is James and I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please leave this video a like and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. But until then, I will see you all in the next video.